Hi, everybody. Welcome back today. Thank you for being here with us through this rainy Thanksgiving last day of classes, right? There's not tomorrow. Please tell me there's no classes tomorrow because I'm not coming in. Happy Thanksgiving to you all. And I hope you and we all wish for you safe travels to be with friends and family or have an adventure of your own. But notice the buildings as you go. So with that, our guest speaker today is Troy Harris. Troy is also a forester. He graduated from Auburn and did his master's degree at the University of Georgia. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. We won't even talk about Georgia. And he is here working as the VP of Timberlands operations or forest operations for Jamestown. It is a large development company, but they also own and manage timberlands as a part of the investment side of their business, and that's what Troy manages. But he and I have been conspiring for, God, we aren't going to say 10 years, but it's getting close to 10 years because Troy fell in love with mass timber just after I fell in love with mass timber. And now in Georgia, in Atlanta, they have built their building, and he's going to talk to you about Jamestown and its goals and ambitions and what they're doing and their new building. So with that, Troy.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I'm really excited. I don't know if there's anybody more passionate about mass timber than Pat and my mentor. And so really excited to come and talk to you guys today about this. If it wasn't for Clemson and Pat and everything that you've done in this industry, I don't know if I would be where I am in my mass timber journey. Pat and I were laughing over lunch that I work for Jamestown, which we are at Ponce City Market in Atlanta. Who's been to Ponce City Market in Atlanta? Just not too many because you're not from it. Ponce City Market is an adaptive reuse project that I'll talk about here in a second. But a big success in Atlanta. Lots of people come there. And back 7 years ago, this showed up on Facebook like just a couple weeks ago. But about 7 years ago, they were doing this event called like Little Big Tiny Houses. And so they brought, when tiny houses were the craze, are they still the craze? I don't hear about them as much, but they brought all these tiny houses into Ponce City Market for people to see and experience in downtown Atlanta. And we got this crazy idea, me and the Georgia Forestry Foundation, that we should do mass timber with this because it was all building, more sustainable and things like that. And so we were trying to look for a piece of mass timber, and I think you were the only one in the Southeast that had a piece of mass timber. But I can remember being out in Atlanta and on this little tent with this mass timber and trying to tell people how cool it was and show them videos of mass timber buildings and stuff. And like people would just blow by us to go by the little houses. And so we finally got people coming to the booth saying, hey, do y'all like trees? Do you love trees? And that would catch people. And I think that kind of in a weird way gets into this whole mass timber and where, my journey has been and what it means to me because I'm a forester. And so if you think about what we do and the way that we manage our forests, and the sustainability nature of that what we do, like that's really interesting. And it has a lot of applications in the ways that we live and consume and do all kinds of things. So we make all kinds of renewable, sustainable products. But really kind of in my journey, nothing is more resonating at this point in time than mass timber. And I think it's connecting people. And as we kind of go through our story, it's connecting people to our product in a way that's different. But when I go out and talk to construction design people, even within my own company, when I talk to architects, engineers, they like it. It's beautiful. It inspires them. But the first question is always, well, by using mass timber, are we going to cut down and destroy the rainforest? Or if we use mass timber, am I cutting down old growth forests? And the answer is no. And as a forester, I know that. But telling and convincing people that using this product and using mass timber and mass timber buildings is a good thing is somewhat challenging. And so, but that's important. So I'm going to wear two hats today. And I would welcome questions along the way. Should be time. I've got lots of picture slides. I don't have a lot of bars and graphs in my presentation, but there should be time at the end. So if there's something you want to ask at the end, please do that as well. But ultimately, I got to start off with the side that yes, I'm a forester and I care passionately and manage a bunch of forests and timberland property, but I'm also can put on a hat as a commercial developer who's done a mass timber project and talk to y'all about what the project was like, why we chose what we did, and we'll kind of explain that as I go through my presentation here. Jamestown, we're a large commercial real estate company. We manage properties all over the United States and Europe. And so investors basically give us money, large pensions, endowments, and other people. We buy buildings and assets and real estate. Basically, the whole premise on real estate as an investment class is you buy and you own something that's real estate. And then with that real estate, you generate revenues and income and rents, if you will, that ultimately pay and give you a proper return. So one of the things on these buildings is they're really cool and they're popping up all over the place. But if I'm going to put on that construction and development hat, I've got to be able to make a profit or make sure that somebody's going to lease out this building and want to be in it. And I think as I look at what we've done here, it speaks loudly that these are the types of buildings that people want to be in. They're fun, they're organic, they feel good. And that's, I'm hoping probably like most of the time, like at least everybody here in this room is of a generation that actually does care about these things and understands them probably better than my generation. But I think what we see is in these buildings is that this is going to be the type of building that attracts the best talent. If you're an office person or you're a company, if you care about these things and you have an answer to how you're making the world a better place, these type of buildings I think really speak loudly as well. So that's kind of interesting and fun as well. Being a commercial real estate company, our ESG journey I think is also important. Back 10 or 15 years ago, as we looked at real estate and what we were doing, I think we were one of the forerunners of getting on and doing things that improved efficiencies in our building. And if you think about the built environment, commercial real estate being the built environment, where we live, where we work, where we play, and you think about what that means to global emissions and things like reducing carbon footprints, the built environment accounts for 40% of the world's global emissions. In the US, it's probably even more than 40%. And of that, 11% is how we build and what we build with. And so if you think about high energy, like concrete and steel, things that are being produced out of things that emit a lot of carbon, our forests and trees capturing carbon, building a mass timber building comes a really interesting ESG story for us, and we kind of like that. Now, you guys, it turns out you guys don't, because you're not in Atlanta, don't know Ponce City Market, but Ponce City Market's like what we do. It's an adaptive reuse building. It's what we started at a long time ago when we were trying to make buildings better. One of the ways you can build better is not build at all. So if you can recycle, repurpose buildings, that's very environmentally friendly. And so our building in downtown Atlanta is a gigantic old Sears and Roebuck building. It was built in 1928, and it was built back before y'all are of a generation. There's a couple of us that would remember Sears in the Sears catalog. Most of you don't know what I'm talking about at all, but it was Amazon before the day. Literally, Sears would send you a catalog. It was full of pretty pictures. You would look at the pictures, you'd pick something out, you'd send them a letter with a check. It would go to the distribution center in Atlanta. They'd go up and they'd pick it, they'd put it in a box and send it to you in rural America. Why they didn't survive and why they didn't become the Amazon of the day, I don't know. I'm sure that would be a great paper. But the point being is like they were the Amazon of the day. This building becomes irrelevant in downtown Atlanta as people move out of the city and into the suburbs and shopping malls start happening. Sears is no longer relevant in the city and becomes this gigantic empty building that's slightly used. It literally, Sears gives it back to the government. So the city of Atlanta owns the building. They use about 10 to 20% of the building because it was built to house things, not people. It had no parking, all kinds of craziness. It did have a railroad running right through the back of it, which was key to the day where it was a warehouse to getting goods in. That stops being material, and running where stuff like that into downtown Atlanta makes no sense at all. So the building becomes obsolete, but this giant, huge, ugly footprint on the city. City of Atlanta starts thinking about interesting things like the Beltline. Lots of towns are now putting together Beltlines, but the Beltline in Atlanta is this old railroad bed that becomes abandoned, but because it's a right of way through the city, and it is elevated, people are put a bike path on it, and now people can start walking to work or biking to work and not getting hit by traffic, right? So this is an interesting idea. Ponce City Market's right next to this Beltline. We're really good at adaptive reuse, so we redo the building completely from the ground up, and now it's probably one of the most successful places in Atlanta, Georgia, as far as a mixed-use environment. We've got a amazing food hall, retail shopping, and then office above it. 3.5 million people visit Ponce every year, making it the second largest destination next to the airport in Atlanta. So if you're going to Atlanta this weekend, go check out Ponce City Market. You'll love it, especially y'all's generation really, really loves it. Really cool. It's got it's got a miniature golf course on the roof. It's just a lot of fun. But it's old and it's quirky and it's wacky. It doesn't make any sense. You get lost. But people love that. People love that type of environment. But reusing buildings is a big way to reduce a carbon footprint. And when we were at Ponce and thinking about what would we do next, how do we replicate this? Like I was saying, I almost got fired for this 7-8 years ago, but I'm like, hey, what about mass timber? And they said, that's crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. But we've kind of come along, and all of a sudden, when you think about what we've done, it really fits the character of an old 1928 Sears and Roebuck building. It's the environment that people want to be in, and it's sustaining the rent rates and everything, which becomes really interesting for what we've done. So that's kind of our project. We call that 619 Ponce. And we'll kind of get to that at the end about what we're going to do with that building and what it looks like. But Jamestown, like Pat said, also owns Timberland. And so we were Timberland managers, and we're thinking, okay, let's build a mass timber building. This is going to be great. Let's do it in downtown Atlanta. All the reasons like why we wanted to do this and stuff. What we found was that, again, we get into that concept of where's your building coming from? Kind of almost farm to table, and we call it Seedlings to Solutions. We've kind of branded it that, but in a farm to table way, it became really important where our building was coming from. Because if you're going to be doing things that are environmental, you're trying to make an impact, and you're trying to build a really nice building, it does not make any sense to be procuring your mass timber building from Europe. But we were surprised to find that as we went out to market from just a pure construction and development standpoint, that if we're going to buy this building and we're going to build it here, the cheapest place to do it would have been from Europe. The second cheapest place would have been from Canada. But if you're telling a story and you know that Georgia is the #1 forestry state in the nation, sorry, South Carolina, but you're a little smaller. But if you're in the #1 forestry state in the nation and you're with a company that owns commercial real estate and timberland, like, and you own timberland in Georgia, why would you not want this to be a homegrown local story? And if you know that the industry has plenty of sawmills and lumber mills and forests that are being sustainably managed, this is a great story. And if you got great friends like Smartlam across the border in Alabama, a mass timber plant that you can do this, all of a sudden you're putting together this farm to table type story that we can use and go out there and tell everybody about and give an example of why you should feel good about building with mass timber, and these buildings just in general. So that's what we did. We basically, like I said, kind of used this super small, tight procurement radius to build our building, which makes it very unique. It's the first Georgia-grown building that there is, made of southern yellow pine, and really probably one of the few in the South that have been done this way, where you can actually track it back to where we know those trees came from. So we put together, basically, when we did this, we phoned friends. We're like, we've got timberland. We're harvesting trees. We've got great relationships with the mills and the markets, specifically Georgia Pacific. Georgia Pacific's headquarters, lucky enough for us, is in downtown Atlanta. And their building overlooks our building. And so when we went to Georgia Pacific and said, hey, we've got an idea, we want to single source this building, would you help us? It was somewhat easy to get the CEOs at Georgia Pacific to say, that makes a lot of sense because, if you're going to build a mass timber building that's locally sourced, locally grown in Georgia, if we're not doing it with GP, we're calling up Weyerhaeuser. We're calling up Interforce, one of the other lumber companies who would do this with us, but they made as a natural partnership. They jumped right on board really quick. We were already harvesting timber and selling it to the mill in Albany, Georgia, so that worked really well. We made the lumber, we sent it across to Alabama, to Dothan, Alabama, and then right back up to us in Atlanta, making it really tight supply chain. Now, again, this is really part of this comes back to the forestry side. What do we do about this? If we're going to do this, let's tell our story. So through a grant through U.S. Forest Service, we've basically made a documentary film with lots of nice, short, little digestible 3 to 4 minute videos. That's at seedlingssolutions.org. I'm sure we can get you that website. But if you go to that website, you can kind of hear this story through the eyes of everybody along the supply chain. And then there are 4 different component parts to it. But we start at the beginning, the seedlings part of it. Where your seedlings come from, we go talk to foresters in the field. Like I said, we have a documentary. We got it professionally done thanks to that Forest Service grant. Who knows how important it is to tell the sustainability part of the forestry story. So you get foresters who normally don't talk to people. We're foresters because we want to be out in the trees and not seeing people all the time. But you get them and you tell your story. So you start with seedlings. You go out to all the other things that come with the forest that are important. So it's not just storing carbon in the trees and that part of it. Like, I think we all kind of get that concept. The trees take in carbon dioxide, they give off oxygen. We all like to breathe, so that's a good thing. But that carbon is the carbon block that's building the tree that ultimately becomes stored in the building. But it's also the water. So you've got all these things that come with a forest that's being properly managed. It's not just the carbon. You're protecting a lot of watershed, right? The rain falls on the forest, it gets filtered before it ever gets into the Chattahoochee River. And so that's a big part of our story about, just water quality and quantity. So flooding, lots of stuff absorbed by the forest. That's a good story. Wildlife, great story. We got these great, huge mosaics of forests out there. Lots of fuzzy critters live in our land. And we want to talk about that because that's an important part about what we do and how we're different, a little bit different than ag. Our crops are 30-year crops. They're mixed mosaic and lots of things live out there and need them. So that's a story. So we want to make sure we captured that. We wanted to talk to the foresters involved. This is Larry Grace. Larry works for a company that I've worked with for a long time. And as we were doing this story and working with the forestry consultants that help us, somebody said, hey, Larry used to work out there. Larry's retired. Larry used to work in that area. We called Larry, and it turns out Larry planted the trees 26 years ago that we were harvesting as part of this harvest to go into our building. So we get Larry Grace to come in and talk about the Olympics in 1996 and what he was doing and how he remembers planting these, but really kind of fun part. We do cut trees. We harvest them. Lots of people don't know much about how we harvest, but these are $1 million plus investments by local loggers. But we do a lot of great things to do and take care of the land while we're doing that harvest, and then we replant it right away afterwards. But this part of the story is cutting, so some people don't like that. We wanted to make sure people understand how that works. This is Miss Kim Woodall. Miss Kim actually owns Evergreen Logging, the logging company that harvested the job. I've been working with Miss Kim for a long time, but what a joy to be able to have this project done with one of the only women loggers that I know of in the Southeast, or at least in Georgia. So that was random luck, although we work together all the time, but what a joy. And she's amazing. And she has 3 different logging crews that she operates and manages and has for a long time. Ultimately, you harvest the timber, you put it on a truck. You guys have probably seen log trucks, right? You drive it to the mill, you mark it with a big Jamestown J. And this is how we kind of the concept of single sourcing it. And then it goes into a pile, and we store that pile until we had enough wood to basically make a run to make our building. And that's where the single sourcing comes in. The industry doesn't really work this way. Normally trucks come in and they pull the wood off the trucks, and then sometimes it goes into the mill and sometimes it goes into a pile, and you don't really necessarily in today's world sort like we did. And that's what makes our building special. And that's why we can say it's single sourced. But basically then we take it to Georgia Pacific, who runs it through their sawmill, cuts it into dimensional lumber, dries it. That part of the system, we've got plenty of those types of mills in the Southeast and South Carolina. We do this, and we do this very well. We're very efficient with it for this and all the other things and paper products that we need. In this case, we turn it into a lot of 2x6 dimensional lumber, pretty stuff, and lots of it. And that's just a small look at just a piece of it, but there's lots of lumber that goes into our mass timber building. But then we ship that mass timber or that lumber right across the state line into Alabama. And then we start again telling our story. Lots of people have never even heard of mass timber or what it is. Plywood on steroids, right? I think you guys have to know what mass timber is, right? That would be embarrassing for if I was like,
No, got that
you got that? You sure? So we tell our story about, how this goes together and everything. So we take them through a mass timber plant. We talk about glulam beams and what glulam beams are. We talk about CLT and what, plywood on steroids, right? So what CLT is, how that looks, how that is working, and how that's a substitute for concrete and steel. We talk about all, the best thing about mass timber really as a developer and somebody building with mass timber is that, most of the fabrication is done off-site. The building comes as a kit. So it's either, it's Legos or IKEA furniture, whichever you want to say it is. But basically, and that creates a different kind of job, right? That's a different kind of job with people are living in a community. They're not traveling from site to site. The facility and the warehouses are usually temperature controlled, comfortable, safer. So we want to make sure that people understand that part of of what this does for jobs and the quality of jobs that are produced from a mass timber plant, and the technology that goes into all of this is not something that you can just get into. So we like to talk about how those jobs play out and how it's different than a normal construction site. Ultimately, it goes into the 619 mass timber kit. With I don't know if you guys can see the little Jamestown blue sign, but all those pieces and parts are numbered and assembled, so they're supposed to come where they do. This is Luke. Luke is not standing on anything. He's a giant, as you'll see later. And I'm 6'1", so we'll see Luke later. But ultimately, it comes in. It's a giant kit. It's a giant IKEA furniture Lego kit. That's pieces and parts of it waiting in Dothan, Alabama for a phone call to say, hey, send us our next load. We put it on a truck, flatbed truck, take it up to Atlanta, and start assembling our building. One of the joys of what I think we found out is part of this logistics and trucking. If you are a developer, that's Ponce. So now you got some idea of scale. I'm really terrible with the things. I think it's 2 million square feet, over 2 million square feet, 9 stories. And you can kind of get that old warehouse feel, by the way, since you haven't seen it, look that one up too. It's a really fun place. That's our first load coming in. Trucking wise, mass timber is very efficient. It comes in, and if you're going in downtown Atlanta, we're in Old Fourth Ward. If you're coming into downtown Atlanta, you can schedule the trucks to come in the middle of the night, at 11 o'clock when there's no rush hour. You can pick and choose that. But that truck comes in, pulls up next to the building site, drops the load, and goes away. We did about 50 of those for the whole building. And that, you may not have a perspective, but 50 is not a lot. We're doing a similar building that is concrete and steel next to us, and they get 40 to 60 loads of concrete a day in a cement truck. And if that has to come in when it has to come in, and in downtown Atlanta, if something goes wrong with the pouring and something stalls out and you get 12 cement trucks parked down Ponce Avenue in downtown Atlanta, you're going to hear about it. And that happens all the time, and they're noisy. So coming in the middle of the night doesn't really work well. There's all kinds of reasons why, wow, this is such an elegant solution when you're building in a downtown environment. Mass timber has so many great positive things with it that are helpful. And again, that logistics, you're cutting down all those truckloads. There's safety, there's emissions, there's all kinds of stuff to our story about that too. Hopefully y'all have seen kind of like mass timber. Again, it's all prefabbed offsite. So you can see down on the end here, we've put certain metal fasteners that become part of the kit. It's notched out in places, but every piece has a place it's going to go on the building. And now it's up to the team to basically know where that is going to be placed. There's another look at the fasteners on one of the glue-M columns that basically just gets fit down into the surveyed out on the site. Those fasteners go in. They literally use some gluey, sticky stuff, and it goes up, and then they set it up, but it starts assembling, it starts fitting together, and as it goes together, it starts holding itself together and becomes a mass timber building. Really, really cool process. Again, on the job side, we had no more than 8 people at a time working on this job, or a crew of 8 to put up our building. 2 of which were women, proving that all you got to do is be smart. And those women they were the only 2 that came from people that had ever done mass timber before. The other 6 had not done mass timber before, and they taught the other 6 how to do it. But by the time we were up on the second floor, everybody kind of knew what was going on. So it takes smart people and people that are willing to work together, but it does not take a lot. In comparison, the job next to us that we're doing has about 120 people on site every day doing different things on a normal concrete and steel pour. So you've got incredible, employee efficiency, and that translates directly to safety. The other, when you're building a mass timber building, I don't know if y'all have ever been on a construction site, but when you're building a mass timber building, you've got 6 to 8 people working on it. They're expecting that mass timber, all they're doing is installing it, right? That piece is going to the next piece. All they're expecting is to have mass timber pieces flying on a crane and being delivered to where they're locally working, and they're ready for it. On a normal job with 120 people, you do have people that are pouring concrete, putting steel in and stuff. And part of that team's doing that. There's a number of the other teams that are doing other things. And the biggest risk is when stuff's flying over your head. And if I hate to say it because it's not a great look, but on a site with 120 people, when the person starts blowing a whistle saying something's above your head, and that happens all day long, they start ignoring it and they're not paying attention anymore. On a mass timber site, you're always knowing that's coming, and that's the only thing you're doing. That's huge on safety. And I know Pat and I were talking today at lunch a little bit. Insurance is a big, big problem for mass timber buildings right now. But based on what we learned on ours, we would strongly argue that this is a very, very safe environment. J.E. Dunn, as the general contractor on this project, I think J.E. Dunn brought probably every executive leader in the company as they started getting familiar with this to see this building, because they're like blown away about the difference between our site and the one that we're next door on. People love mass timber. Yes, sir. So I'm going to repeat because I'm mic'd and you're not. I was told for people offsite. And the question was, how do you go about proving that this is safer or better to the insurance companies? My view on that would be time, experience. The problem in the US right now is we just don't have enough mass timber buildings. We don't have the same amount of contractors, especially the ones that could drive it, like a J.E. Dunn. The big name ones are not doing this yet. Structure Craft is a company that subcontracted to help us put this one up under J.E. Dunn, but I think it's knowledge. And insurers basically getting in these buildings, feeling them, seeing them, watching the site. Hopefully they'll get on board with it. Pat, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's a work in progress. There's a lot of us a lot of people who are working on that with folks who are in the insurance business so that they can understand. And they've never seen these buildings and they just make assumptions. And so do fire marshals who influence the industry. So they all make assumptions. So it's really, you got to get them out and let them tour around. And I bet the state fire marshal has been to see this.
Oh,
Like all over.
the fire marshal, the city of Atlanta, all the counties came in points in time and that's a big deal because when Atlanta first started in Atlanta, Georgia Tech Candida building is probably the first in Atlanta. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. But then there's another one done by Hines called T3, and Hines is doing a bunch of these same T3 concept buildings all over the country, but they had to get the city of Atlanta people on board. But all that leads to, like, you got to get everybody seeing your building and come and experience it, to feel it, to get it. And that's, I think, was a big part of where we went on that and trying to influence that. And you've got to be a storyteller. That's why we're doing what we're doing, because otherwise people aren't going to understand it. And it's not so intuitive to people. Most people kind of go, oh, are we going to destroy the rainforest? This is a 25, actually, I think it's 20, almost 27 foot column. At the time, that was the largest southern yellow pine column ever made. It might still be, but I think I heard there's one coming. Again, my point here is people love to touch it. They love to feel it. They love to hug it. Our construction and development team is really happy to be getting their mass timber building in the ground and coming up. They're having to deal with the other building next door, which is fine, and that's in their comfort zone. They're used to doing those, but they'd never done a mass timber building, so that they're very excited and they're very happy. At the end of it, I think they've kind of blown away. They're all in as far as doing more. That's our team. There's Luke. I'm not lying. Dude's a giant. Don't put Luke in a picture of mass timber because he always makes the beams and columns look smaller than they are. But so focus on us. But that's kind of the Georgia Pacific Smart Lamb, Georgia Forestry Foundation team that helped put this building up together. Structure Craft, I'm sorry, also. Quickly, you guys may have seen this and stuff, but it goes up very fast. So it basically just gets set up like Lego or again, IKEA pieces. Here's day 16. And then we were competing with a building right next to us, again, concrete and steel. We had to share the crane. So ours kind of goes up in staggered pieces. But, you know, here's day 58 with the first floor, and by 62, second floor is already installed. But it goes up really quick. And in an urban environment, that's really important. And so we were topped out in about 3 months on our building. And again, we were sharing crane space with the one next door. But that leads to, you know, really happy crews, very efficient. Everybody knows what they're doing. If you haven't seen it, that's, you know, the size of that CLT panel. So I got that shot in there. And again, super happy crew. When they get done with the project, feel really good about it. But then they're on to the next one, which is that construction development's that way anyways, but that's how it goes. Southern yellow pine as a species, I think is super interesting. We found people are really, really drawn to it. If we built the building from European wood, white woods tend to be more modern looking, and sometimes that's fine for lots of people like that look. There's not as many knots in it. But, you know, being one of the first big mass timber built things made with southern yellow pine, and we're kind of going all out, all exposed with it. What we continue to hear is the grain nature of southern yellow pine, it doesn't replicate at all. So it's always random. The whitewoods tend to kind of just be a little bit uniform. And then the knots in the southern yellow pine give it that look of really being a piece of wood. That seems to be very popular as I talk to architects who like the species a lot. And the teams that really liked the way that yellow pine performed versus some of the other products that they use. We were surprised that it attracts wildlife. We didn't know that was going to happen, but it does. So, you know, we had a bear sighting in downtown Atlanta. All right, come on. I know it's the day before Thanksgiving going and stuff like that. But, and then one of the other things that being at Ponce City Market, we like to surprise and delight. And so as a developer, we wanted to tell this story. We knew we wanted to do that. But, you can't let people and everybody onto your construction and development site, although I don't know how many people we've toured through the building, a lot. But being Jamestown and the way that we think about things, we want to do something playful. So we sponsored a design competition at Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech students came up with some concepts of how this is called a pop-up, like a little kiosk or whatever, but it's an experiential pop-up kiosk that we created. This is called the Taurus Arch. For all y'all that don't know, a Taurus is a fancy name for tire swing. So that's a piece of CLT that was fabricated. It's a tire swing, and people can come in and experience it, touch it, because I think the thing about mass timber that we learned at our little tiny house event, like if you don't touch it and feel it, you don't get how it replaces concrete and steel. You have to tap on it. You have to beat on it. You have to let your 8-year-olds swing on it. And that's how you get people to touch and experience the product. And I think we found that very impactful. That's almost like a best practice. We're thinking like, if you're going to build a mass timber building, do something like this right next to it. So people, as they're watching the construction site, can go touch it and feel what you're doing. Fun story about Georgia Tech, because so smart kids designed the thing. We knew that we couldn't have it swing too far and crush people, so we tethered it to the bottom. Like that was not. If you want to have fun, do epic tire swing failures, and you'll see why you need to tether it. So we put it up. We're all proud of ourselves. I walk away. I come back down. Everybody's left that helped us put it up. All the students are gone, and I come back about 4 hours later, and there's 3 8-year-old boys. And they've taken the swing and done the wrapping. You know how you wrap a swing and then you let your friend, it's probably called something, I don't know what it's called, but you let the kids spin around, and they had done this and had it like up 3 feet in the air, and like it's really, really heavy. It was bad. So anyways, we had to do it twice, tether it twice so it wouldn't do that. But within 4 hours, 3 8-year-olds figured out how to get us in trouble and sued probably if we wouldn't have figured that out. But we like to have fun. Outside, this is going to be kind of the new building, the concept of what we do with a mass timber building. We're going all wood all the time as much as we can. Huge windows. The windows open so from an environmental standpoint, in downtown Atlanta, that's pretty rare. But the windows all have, will be able to be opened. And on 3 sides of the building, there's large patios with the California windows that'll open. So I'm thinking if I had a work environment where this time of year I could open the windows and get some nice cool fall air, that would be pretty amazing. So we're excited about that. This is the Ponce side. First floor, 25-foot ceilings. Again, you can see that's going to be Pottery Barn. Pottery Barn's super excited to be in a environmentally focused company about what this means to them and taking the first floor as a tenant. But we're excited about that because that's a public space. And so y'all will be able to go walk into this building. Most mass timber buildings, you can't just go into because they're basically office spaces or something like that you just can't walk into and experience. In our case, you'll be able to experience it because the bottom floor is retail. Top 2 floors are already leased out to a company called Sage. They're a HR software company that's moving their international headquarters to Atlanta. But again, environmentally focused, environmentally minded. They wanted, a statement to say we care about how we're making the world a better place, and we're going to do that by leasing space here. In today's current environment, both spaces are getting top tier market lease rates and leasing in an environment that basically just sucks. So office is not good right now, but it proves that a differentiated product offering and being different and being environmentally focused is probably a good thing if you're going to lease space. And I mean, who would not want to be in this type of a building? If I'm going to be in downtown Atlanta, going to work and doing what I do, like I'm going to want to be in a space like this. And I think as I talk to people, and especially y'all's age, like this really resonates. And I think people understand that a company that thinks about this and thinks about this is where we want to office, I think says a lot. I think it will attract top tier talent to that space. So we're really excited about that. That's all I have as far as droning on and on and on about my pretty building, but we're really proud of it. We think it sets a new standard and a new mark being that sustainable source building. And so we're really excited. I'd love to take any questions that anybody might have. And I do know that I'm probably the worst possible spot in a speaker engagement, I think, is the spot right before cocktails at the end of a day, right? I'm almost sure that today, the day before Thanksgiving break, keeping you guys from going home is probably the worst spot ever. So I would understand too, but be glad to take any questions if anybody's. Completely understand. Yes, ma'am. Yep. So the question was, is there any difference in the way the wood is treated, and specifically maybe to Atlanta or the Southeast or anywhere? Mass timber, like the pop-up we did treat, and we're actually doing a gigantic experiment. That's like an outdoor environment. So that one is treated, somewhat stained, but that's for weatherproofing. Mass timber does not do well by itself without a treatment. The building itself, this building inside Jamestown's decision was to not treat it at all. There are some people who will treat it with different things. We wanted to just embrace that the wood and what it would become. I have a bet with one of our team members in the like I said, there's not really too many communal public spaces for mass timber, and I have a bet that within like 18 months in the Pottery Barn, that you'll start seeing like a museum, statues get patinaed and stuff. I think the mass timber will be patinaed like in a certain level with people touching it a lot. But right now we don't want to ruin that. We think it's going to be really cool. But there may be some reasons why some people would treat it, but we're not doing it. Some people do. And it's wood. You could stain it any color you wanted to if you wanted to. If you wanted to paint it white, I guess you could. Yes, ma'am.
You guys talked about working in the Sears and Roebuck building.
So the Sears and Roebuck building next door to Ponce is the adaptive reuse building that we did. And yes, our offices are in that building, and as well as many, many other tech firms. And you know, no, we did not do that. We did not do any mass timber on the old Sears and Roebuck building. That's a traditional brick, concrete, steel. The wood floors are wood from like natural maple from 1928 and stuff. So that stayed the same. This was the next step of, you're going to build something as cool and hip and happening as what we did with the 28 building. How do you build a new building that way? And we felt like wood gave it that same Weyerhaeuser old feel, that old lodgy feel. Yes, sir. Yeah, so the question was, could mass timber replace other buildings? I sure hope so. I think we're seeing such strong interest in it. In the US, like it's exponentially growing the number of starts with mass timber. And I think the limitations right now are the mass timber plants in the US. If you wanted to build a mass timber building today, if you wanted it like now, you'd probably have to go to Europe to get it. We think that's going to change, but there's a dramatic, huge pivot to using this material, and especially as the impact, 11% of what we build with and the carbon emission cycle. This building, I'm sorry, that's probably one of the best and most important stories that you wanted me to cover. So this building in and of itself, thank you for the reminder. We calculated, and this building could put on the Georgia Carbon Registry, which basically is a new registry by the state, first state to do this, but where you calculate the difference between building with traditional methods versus this one. And this is a 75% reduction in carbon emissions if we'd built it the traditional way. And so there's a lot that goes into how you calculate that and make that determination. But because of the local source story and substituting materials, this is 75%. Or for the same amount, we could build 4 times more buildings. We could do a lot. So I think people are really, really asking themselves, yes, should we do this? And they want to do it. So I think it's going to be a big substitute, and this will be material as far as how we build. Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. So the question was, if you look at the skyline pictures, I think this one's kind of there too. You know, Ponce is like 11, 12 stories. The tower is even taller. Our Scout Living project, which is a hotel meets Airbnb concept that is kind of interesting and cool in of itself. Right next door is about 21, I think. And so the question was, scale, could we have done more? Why didn't we do more? This is a big not problem, but we were talking about insurance earlier. We decided the biggest one in Atlanta currently is 7 stories, the T3 building. We, for different reasons, didn't want to go too big on front of Ponce de Leon Avenue. We didn't want to ruin the character as you look down the iconic Ponce, or ruin Ponce City Market, which is a historic building in the register. So it's a historic registered building. We didn't want to ruin that. We wanted to complement it. But at the time, we probably couldn't have gone much taller. What's happening is city codes, city planners, zoning, cities are having to approve the product, get the fire marshals to like it. And so we see a lot of cities they'll let this happen and embrace this, but going taller is harder. And so by the time you get to about 7 is probably doable in most cities, but you got to get into a progressive city before you can go much taller than that. Atlanta, Pat and I were just talking, has approved a 21-story in downtown Atlanta, Buckhead. And so the only point I have here is, yes, we'd like to go tall. Taller could be better in some implications, but every city is going to have roadblocks. So where you want to do these buildings is a big deal. And so some cities are adopting it, some aren't, but you're going to have to, if you're the first, it's going to be tougher to go taller, but I think it rapidly adopts and just gets better and better and easier the next time you're a person building. Yes.
I have several questions.
Okay. How am I on time? I don't.
We've got
You got
another
Okay.
15 minutes.
Good.
So you mentioned working with structure craft. Obviously, they bring a lot of knowledge and experience to the table. I don't remember you mentioning the architect. Who's the architect?
Handle.
We have several alumni.
Oh, good. Yep.
Next, if you go to the interior rendering, the last one.
I will.
Thinking about the structure craft role, the role of the architect, integration of systems,
Mhm.
and how much your role were involved in these discussions.
Yeah.
But for those
Yep.
in our audience,
Yep.
Just noticing the way that the beams are situated on top of the skirter
Mhm.
leaves the space to run ductwork. That's a huge, huge issue in designing mass timber buildings, is designing for that measure of integration with systems to make sure that that's done in a neat way. I'm sorry.
Yep.
So, sorry. Yes, for those that are online, I'll repeat my my observation. Just that this slide here illustrates an important point when it comes to designing and planning with mass timber, and that is the integration of building systems. And so you can see the ductwork in the way that that's able to run in the space between the timber deck and the top of the girders. So I just wanted to, from your perspective on the development side, can you recount those sorts of conversations and the decision making and how to keep this clean and expose all the beautiful wood without involving ceilings and all of that?
I can fake this one probably pretty well for a while. I am not an architect by any means, but having been on all the tours and understanding kind of where we're going with a lot of things, this concept was extremely well thought out and planned for in the architectural phase. Being adaptive reuse, old buildings, warehousey type buildings, we know how hard it is to run all the mechanical and all the other things that go along with it. And we also know that people love it. But if you didn't do what we did with leaving those holes in there, then you'd have to, every time you came to a cross section, you'd have to drop. And there's all kinds of reasons why this is more expensive to do, but mass timber holds it very well. Like if you pre-plan, pre-design, and all the pieces are coming together in a mass timber building, it actually makes it a whole lot easier to do and fit and component. But that was very, very planned for in our design. We wanted to embrace the mass timber and get everything up as high up as we possibly could, while allowing for adaptability. We've been adaptive reuse. You never know what the next tenant's going to want. So being adaptable is really interesting. And then this rendering, I don't think works as good as some of our others, but we are going, if you will, all wood all the time. And so the floor is no longer, in this rendering, the floor is cement. Most mass timber buildings, even though you put in the mass timber piece, the CLT is the floor / ceiling, most people would choose to cover the floor with cement for a number of different reasons. We're doing a different system that they've been doing in Europe for a while. I don't know if I've heard of many people doing it in the US, but basically we will take and frame out the floor with 2x4s, basically fill the 2x4s with sand, and then put a floor just like your house or whatever with OSB, and then whatever the tenant wants on top of that, whether that's carpet, hardwood floor, or whatever. But our floor system will be, for the acoustics and a number of different reasons, will be this kind of 2x4 filled with sand. That sand allows us to, in the future, or whatever the next tenant wants, basically when they go to do what they're going to do with their space, if they want a desk over here with computers, whatever wiring over there, and over here, whatever, they can do it wherever they want. The sand allows us to go into the floor system, shoot across with wiring, conduit, or whatever through the system, and come up wherever we want on the other side. If you don't do that and you go with a concrete style, then you're literally having to go down through, and you got to mess with the tenant below and interrupt their business below them. And so we strategically chose to do that type of a system. You may know more about what that's called or whatever, but we're really interested about that sand concept in the Southeast, and how we do that. But we're told that it works very well in Europe.
So I have a question, because yesterday I was on the phone with designers, and we were doing this building for the forestry building, which is going to be at the corner of Perimeter and Cherry. They're showing the pictures of the light fixtures, and they love all these fancy pendant lights. And I said, yeah, but you're not showing me what the ceiling looks like when you have all the conduit up there running. Because you've chosen pendant lights and you didn't ask me about the pendant lights, Miss Designer. And now I've got conduit running. Well, and she says, well, we'll just ask Smartland if they can just gird out. And I'm like, we are not cutting into the CLT and having strips in it. So go there wrong. But you need to go back and look at, is this the right light fixture? Because if you look at what they presented to you, and this is what people who buy buildings or build buildings look at, you don't see any sprinkler systems up there, and you're not seeing anything running that electricity to, and I don't think you're dropping it through a hole in the CLT to come out the other end, because you don't want to interrupt the company below you who's leasing a space differently. So I assume you're painting conduit and putting up for the lighting. So I can't wait to see the finished building. I'm interested in what the finished building is.
Yeah.
Because they're like, but, and I'm like, no, you've got a ceiling full of conduit. You have not told me and you're not showing me what it looks like. They were also they wanted to put, I hate to pick on the building, but they wanted to put maple right next to Southern Pine, like run it up and adjust it. And I'm like, have you ever looked at maple right next to Southern Pine? They're like, well, no, we didn't. And I said, well, they aren't going to look good together. You can put them separate, but you're not going to go to the ceiling with maple and pine across the top. It's going to look really funky, and you don't know what the colors are, because these people have ever worked with wood. Sorry, but that's the way it is. Sorry, I diverge. But just know that if you're going to do this, you have to get them to give you reality on pretty pictures. This is a great shot of the HVAC world, and the conduit are going to work right along and follow through. But again, you're going to have a conduit up there running for that electric. So, and I assume that is type 3. So we're going to have sprinklers.
There's sprinklers in it right now. I think they look in our application at Ponce City Market, and the warehousing nature of the building next door. and what it is and how people embrace,
And it looks.
brick and concrete and all those, it makes complete sense for our building. And I think the way the warehousiness of this building combined with the old timbers concept, I think really works well. But if you're just building a mass timber building in an urban environment or on a university campus, I think that's not going to fit. So those are excellent questions to be asking and getting in your pre-planning. I can tell you that, on the interior of the building, I think you saw there was, let me stay here, this piece right here behind the cabinet, a lot of the larger electrical, some of the plumbing, some of the things are hidden in that wall. That's what we will do with it. But then again, I don't know all the architectural terms and stuff like that, but most mass timber buildings have this kind of cement, for the that everything ties into. That's changing. I know that there's really some interesting applications to that, but that's where the elevator bank, the stairs, and everything. But that is kind of that anchor or spine to the building, and a lot of that goes up and down the building is in that part of the building.
We have about 3 minutes.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
it is an important point. And I love my architecture friends, don't get me wrong. But you give me a pretty picture and then I get into the reality of it. And when I'm choosing things like pendant lights versus long lights, every pendant light is going to have a conduit to it.
Yep.
Something's got to run the electricity. So thinking about those things, it's
Oop.
not what makes the building look pretty, it's what makes the building look good overall, considering the conduits, because they aren't thinking about that. They're designing for a finished look, and they don't think about it.
I think what I will note though, that I've seen Google's really into this in California, and is doing some really, really creative things. Google is doing things and you can do this with mass timber, which I think is fascinating, is you can afterwards, if you don't like something, again, you'd want to check with your engineer, but you can route right through that mass timber and create a space. And Google offsite with the CNC pieces are on their columns have notched a 4x4 piece out and are running pieces of electrical and stuff through that system. But it's in the material, but then they're actually leaving it exposed too, which is really, really interesting. So if you're thinking ahead with a mass timber building, it is just, I hate to say it again, but it's in a piece of IKEA furniture, and IKEA figures out how to notch and cut and drill, and these buildings can do all that too. So if you work with your architect and you said this was important to me, I have a hard time believing it wouldn't. It's completely possible to do things. Don't do it on a back order. Do it ahead of time.
It's got to be engineered in and planned
Yeah.
in. You can do it. I agree. But you don't get to we're at 90% design firm, and they're wanting to do it.
Yeah.
No, we're not.
And an aftermarket order would probably cost you a fortune, but I completely agree with you.
So it is a lot more pre-planning, but it's so much quicker. And when will you move in?
So Pottery Barn is finishing out their space. You give it over to the tenant, and then they're in charge of making it what they want it to be. And so they're doing that right now. I've updated the pictures, but they'll be up. They kind of wanted to be in before the holidays, but it's not going to happen. But they'll be in probably January, February. And then Sage is going to move in, start fitting out first quarter, and they'll be in themselves like they want it, office third quarter.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving.